Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode we're talking about NFL sophomore wide receiver outlook on Quentin Johnston. We're going to determine if he should remain rostered or if you should move on. If you're new to the channel, new to the stuff that I do, you can check the description where you can find some different links to things to check him out, or at least some of the work that I've done in terms of data. But let's get right to this video. So first off, the setup. Quentin Johnston was drafted by the Los Angeles Chargers with pick 21 in the 2003 or 2023 NFL draft class. Since that time, he has accumulated 38 receptions for 431 yards and 2 touchdowns in his rookie season. It was less than a spectacular season for Johnston, but many analysts are done with him. But is it too soon to cut him off your roster? So let's take a look at his pre-draft profile, first to determine his potential upside, and then take a look at how he performed in the NFL based on advanced statistics. So taking a look at his pre-draft profile, what did his data say about him pre-draft? Taking a look at that information, he was okay. He had a 61 percentile receiving market share score. He had a 56 total offensive market share score, and then a 62 percentile touchdown market share score. So his overall data was below what the starter averages is. That's a little bit of a concern. It really is, because you want to see that number more so in the 80 to 70 percentile. And yet he did come from an offense that you would categorize as sort of a spread offense, but even with that, these are not the numbers that you want to see with a prospect like this. When he gets his efficiency numbers, this is where he performed a little bit better. So he had a incredible yards per reception score in the high 90 plus percentile range, and then he had an 80 percentile TD percentage. TD percentage is touchdowns per touch. So he was very efficient, but his production wasn't that great. So the question you would basically ask yourself as an evaluator is, was his evaluation issue in terms of, was it usage? Was it the offense that he was in? Or is he just not that productive of a guy? And that was the biggest sort of question mark that came out from his data initially. Then when he gets to athleticism testing, really explosive, 97 percentile in terms of his explosion traits, 69 percentile in terms of speed for his size, and then 41 percentile in terms of flexibility. That was the one area where it was a little bit of a pause for concern because of that flexibility number. Typically, wide receivers that are inflexible, guys that don't really have good short shoulder three cones, have trouble developing as route runners. It just is what it is. And again, that number is speaking to change of direction ability, which is what routes are all about, your ability to change directions. It's not to say that you can't train a stiff wide receiver to run routes. It's just that it's going to be a little bit harder. At the very least, you're going to have to limit what he does, make plays specifically for what he does to really maximize his ability. And that's the one concern with him, is based on, his overall routes, or at least his rawness as a route runner, which is what some people cited about him. Now, when you get to adjusted production scores, adjusted production takes a look at things like age, strength of schedule, and strength of team. He did really well in these areas. He pretty much was in the all-pro averages at the position when it came to his age, based on his production and based on his level of competition. So this was not an issue at all for Quentin Johnston in terms of that. It's just his actual data, when you take a look at it separate from his age and separate from his strength of schedule, was a little sketchy. It was a little sketchy in terms of that. Overall pre-draft profile. Quentin Johnston had a overall data score of 92.75 out of 100. This, combined with his draft status as a first-round wide receiver, makes him an ideal candidate for breakout potential. However, that does not always equal early NFL success, as the average market share for a wide receiver selected in the pick range of 20 to 32 with a 90 or higher data score since 1969 is 62.38 out of 100. But now let's see how he performed in the NFL. So we took a look at him pre-draft wise, because I tell this to people all the time. What did he test like pre-draft wise? Because once you have an idea of like what his expectation is from college, add in draft stats, everything else like that, you can kind of see, okay, is there, even though he wasn't that successful early on, is there extra potential behind that? So that's essentially why we did that. So we've at least established that he did have data indicative of a potential breakout at the NFL level. That's the least that we could say about the data that we've seen so far, with some risk. He definitely is risky. When he gets his NFL production, he did not have that productive of a season. I already rattled it off: 38 receptions with about 400-ish yards and 2 touchdowns. When you take a look at this from a uh, percentile scoring range, he was above average, what NFL wide receivers typically do, but not necessarily an 80 to 90 percentile, which is where you want players to be long term. Especially 90 percentile is really where you want them to be in terms of being a starter. When you take a look at his micro production, it's a little scary. His yards before contact per reception was 46 percentile. His yak was only 52. His 8 out was 74, and his average broken tackles per reception was high. So his yak wasn't that great. His broken tackles were above average, but his yards before contact per reception, not the best in terms of that particular area, with a really, above average 8 out. 8 out isn't the biggest deal in the world, but that definitely is a little bit of a concern for him. Then when he gets his other production traits, he was below average in terms of his drop percentage. Again, not the biggest deal in the world. As he catches more footballs, that number is definitely going to go up. His quarterback rating was 39 out of 100, which is not the best, meaning that when quarterbacks targeted him and he caught passes from them, they would have only had a 39 quarterback rating, which is not good. Doesn't matter how good the quarterback is, you want that number to at least be average or above average. Now his TD percentage was 48 percentile, and his first down percentage was only 28. So again, he did get at least average in terms of touchdowns per touch at the NFL level, but his first down percentage was only 28 percentile. So that's not that ain't cooking. That ain't cooking. Now, when you get to his overall NFL production, so overall NFL production takes a look at the numbers that we looked at before, 69 percentile. So if you take a look at his yardage, his touchdowns, all that kind of stuff, that's pretty much what that was. His interception percentage was 52 percentile. Not the best, but not terrible either. His efficiency, again, taking a look at his micro production, adding all those numbers up together and looking at it, 59 percentile. Not that bad, not that great in terms of micro production or efficiency overall. In terms of yards, before contact, yak per reception, stuff like that. And then his overall wide receiver score, which includes his production plus his efficiency, would have been 66 percentile. So slightly above average NFL wide receiver. Not what you would expect from a first rounder, essentially. Now, when you get to his other NFL production, so other NFL production takes a look at things like targets, receptions, yards per reception, touchdowns, first downs, success percentage, long receptions per game, yards per game, catch percentage, and then yards per target. All these areas were, again, in the similar range that we saw with the other data. So the other data that I showed you was advanced NFL statistical data from Pro Football Reference. This is the basic statistical data from Pro Football Reference. And based on his basic data, it doesn't really look much better in terms of his overall production over here. When you look at his touch data, so this takes a look at his number of touches on offense, his yards per touch, his yards per scrimmage, his overall touchdowns per touch, fumbles wasn't that bad. TD percentage, not that great. And again, this is with the largest sample size. The advanced data takes a look at data from 2018 until 2023. This takes a look at data from 1994 to 2023. And then first down percentage was in the 29 percentile. So similar rate. TD percentage good. First down percentage not that great. When you look at a larger sample size, it kind of evens out in the same range. Then when you look at his macro production, 68 percentile, pretty much in line with what we already saw. His micro production was only 29 percentile. And then his receptions was 46, and then his touchdowns to first downs was 32.15. Not ideal at all. in terms of that. So that's definitely a concern in terms of his data here from that perspective. Now, based on the parameters set with the wide receivers with similar seasons at age 22 compared to Johnston, I narrowed down the list to these wide receivers. So 8 out of 11 wide receivers saw improvements from their age 22 season to 23. And then 5 out of the 11 improved to top 50 or higher status overall. So essentially, these are all the wide receivers that performed like Johnston as a 22-year-old, and then this is what they did in the second season in a similar range of possibilities. So this is sort of like the typical expectation for a wide receiver who starts out like that, and then what they did in the second season. So this list is a little bit concerning. I mean, when you look at the names on this list, you got guys like Will Fuller, Romeo Doubs, Nico Collins, though that's a fun name. He had a really great season in the third year. Jerry Jeudy, of course, not exactly where you want him to see. Of course, you have Cordell Patterson, Corey Coleman, Kadarius Toney, stuff like that. But not exactly where you would want him to be testing with. And that just is kind of a testament to why a lot of NFL analysts, or I should say fantasy football analysts, are kind of fading Johnston. Because when you look at the historical data, they may not be looking at this, but in their guts, they're feeling this. And this is kind of the issue with him when you look at it like that. Now, when you get to his other data, so this is more of a deep dive into market share data from 1969 to 2023. So building off of the backs of the other data that I've done in terms of profiling players, particularly the rookie wide receivers this year, which I am going to do other positions than just wide receivers. It's just I'm kind of down that rabbit hole right now, and then I'll eventually get to the other rabbit holes once I get done digging. But based on this data, so this takes a look at first rounders in 1969 to 2023 that were picked between picks 20 to 32 with a 90 or higher data score. Remember, he had a 92 percentile data score. Where Johnston started, only 5 out of 19 wide receivers reached 80 to 90 plus percentile market share in year 2. So when you look at year 1, none of those wide receivers had an 80 to 90 plus percentile area. And again, this is where we're starting at. So we're looking at the wide receivers who tested like Johnston, who had those similar parameters to him in their rookie season. So year 2, 5 out of 19 reached 80 to 90 plus percentile. And then year 3, 7 out of 19 reached 80 to 90 plus percentile. So there's still hope for Quentin Johnston. There really is. Especially with a guy like Eric Moulds, because Eric Moulds, his year 1 production was 50 percentile and then 54 in year 2 until he finally had a breakout in year 3. You would want him to more so have a Roddy White, Carl Pickens like development. So when you look at Roddy White and Carl Pickens, who are the wide receivers, I think they're like 4th and 5th on the list right here. They had, about a 66, 68 percentile season as a rookie, and then they improved to 76, 78 percentile, and then they finally hit the 90 percentile area once they, got to the third year. Similar situation with Dez Bryant. He was about 64 percentile, 79 percentile in year 2, and then he finally hit 91 percentile in year 3. And then, of course, you got guys like Lynn Swann, who kind of had a big improvement from his rookie season. Jalen Reagor, you would hope you wouldn't have that sort of thing, but that's when you kind of need to sell. So if Quentin Johnston in year 2 doesn't really have much improvement, you can honestly sell then because, again, it's still not where you want it to be. But you also have those other players in that list. Overall, so the overall outlook for Quentin Johnston, I would say realistically he has until year 3 before you can completely and utterly move on from him. However, you would like to see gradual progression into the 60 to 79 percentile range of his production. There's only been one wide receiver to have the same percentile production from rookie season to sophomore season to see a massive swing in production based on the prior wide receivers example. So essentially, there's only been one wide receiver who was just terrible for 2 seasons or average for 2 seasons, and then all of a sudden had a 90 plus percentile season, Eric Moulds. So you don't really want to see that from him. You want to see that progression. You want to see that upward trajectory, and hopefully this season is that season where we see it. So 2024 will be a big season for Johnston to either get better or the chances of success will become more even or even harder for him in 2025. So if you already own Johnston, I would hold him this year unless you're offered better compensation for him. But I would hold him a year, and if he doesn't improve after this year, you can hold on to him for one more year. But I would seriously consider selling him at that point. Okay, I really would. So 1 year, keep him this year. See progression. He doesn't have to be amazing. He just has to show progression. So again, progression from a data perspective is about a 20-point tick up in his production, his moving average, if you will. And if he doesn't do that, cut bait, move on. All that stuff out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Jim Coburn. You can check out my other work at Draft Coburn, or not Draft Coburn, but at patreon.com/jcoburn. You can also check out my X, formerly known as Twitter account, at Geometrics, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.